you so much.
All right, so we are joined all the way from Lowell, Massachusetts by my friend and plastic engineer, STEM advocate, content creator, Lilian Judy. We are so glad to have you today. We've got a room full here with us at Velma Jackson High School, and we're recording this for all of our friends in Madison County schools and our computer science engineering classes across middle schools and high schools, and for our YouTube channel as well. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me the second time. I'm really excited about this conversation. And I hope that the students can, learn a thing or two about my journey and what I'm trying to do now. Yeah.
Yeah, and before we get into plastic engineering, because it really does touch everything we use, big and small, tell us a little bit about your background, because I know you've been open about it on social media about your college journey and your daughter of African immigrants.
Yeah. So my name is Lilian Ajimaniaboa. I like to use Lilian Judy because it's just easier. I'm originally from Ghana in West Africa. So a couple of years ago, I embarked on a journey to come pursue my bachelor's engineering degree in America. And so I left my whole family back in Ghana and came here by myself. I started off in Florida because I initially wanted to pursue chemical engineering. And I went to Florida Institute of Technology. I was there for about 2 years, and it was really a struggle, if I can say that. It was really tough for me and it was a number of factors like culture shock, being here by myself, being very young. I think I was like 19 by myself. And so a lot of different factors came into me struggling in that journey. And so it was so bad to the point that I actually I was placed on probation. I think after my first year, which was really tough because I was here on scholarship and not being from a country and being faced with something so drastic where it could potentially have sent me back home to Ghana, which all the shame and everything that came with it would have been really hard to deal with. Um, so I was lucky enough to be transferred over to Massachusetts, where I had an auntie who she is a guidance counselor at a university. And she told me I have the opportunity to start again, to try again, to get a second chance. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to take it. And in between that, I was honestly at a point where I started thinking engineering was not for me, which I think a lot of us would face. Like there are times where either you fail a class or you get a really low grade, you start doubting yourself, you start questioning why am I even doing this? Is this really for me? Is this a path I'm supposed to be on? And so when I started feeling all those things and having all those thoughts, it became as serious as me not wanting to even be on this planet anymore. Like I actually considered taking my own life, which I thank God I was not successful because then I wouldn't be here to be able to share this story. But when I was able to transition to Massachusetts, I went to a community college. I got an associate's in engineering science degree, and I was recognized as one of three outstanding students that year. And I graduated. I was able to transition into UMass Lowell, where I got my plastics and engineering degree. And I was able to do a number of co-ops during my time pursuing the plastics degree. And I also participated in an industry capstone where it kind of served as a co-op or internship because I was working with a company outside of campus. And all these experiences sum up to make me who I am now. And so I hope that kind of gives you guys an idea of my background and where I started from.
Yeah, and you talked about plastic engineering, and me and you were talking last night. We actually have the program here at University of Southern Mississippi in polymer engineering, which is pretty much the same thing. And I
Yeah.
don't, people talk about the chemical and mechanical, electrical, and all that's cool, but plastic engineering, it may not be as glamorous as the other areas, but it really does touch every single thing that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was something I wasn't aware of. I stumbled into the plastics engineering program. And upon reading about it, I was really intrigued and I was really excited about pursuing this program because it literally affected everything in my life has to do with the plastic. whether you go to the hospital, whether you have surgery, they're using plastic-based products or plastic products to perform the surgeries, to even store the blood, the medication, all these things. And so plastics are essential. And I know now in this climate, there's a lot about recycling, and plastics has like a really negative look to people, but there are essential parts of the world, or essential processes that do require the use of plastics, at least at this point. And so I was really amazed, and that's actually part of the reason why I decided to pursue that degree. When I talk with my classmates who are pursuing aerospace engineering, I can connect with them on a materials level. I talk to the
Absolutely.
chemies, the mechanical engineers, everybody, regardless of what industry you end up in, someone is using a plastic, and there's always going to be a materials engineer, which is like the overarching title that people get, but most of the time it is a plastics engineer that has enough knowledge about it.
Yeah, and we have a lot of athletes with us right now, and a lot of sports equipment is starts
Exactly.
a
Yes.
plastic engineer making sure the material is safe, and that it will protect them if they're we got a lot of football players. Football shoulder
Yeah.
pads are made by plastic engineers. Football helmets, basketball shoes,
Exactly.
computers are watching on now. So there's a lot of plastic that goes into that. And we had your friend Anna Empire Tuesday, and she does cryopreservation, but that
Yeah.
cryopreservation of those cells has to be in a plastic material that can withstand the freezing temperatures that she stores those samples in. And this is people's lives at stake depending on plastic materials that has to go through a plastic engineer.
Yeah. And that's very interesting that you mentioned that. So I have 2 points. When you mentioned the footballers, I remember I had interviewed for a position with a company that makes golf balls. I think it was called Titleist or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
And
title.
I was so, yeah, I was so amazed. I was like, oh my gosh, like I can actually work with a company that makes golf balls. Like that was just so cool to me. And so, people think about making like medical products, people want to make like consumer products like bowls and spoons and forks, but you can go all the way to even work in a field in an industry that you enjoy. If I was a huge golfer, that would have been a win-win for me, but I'm not. And you mentioned talking to Anna, yes, a few days ago. I actually transitioned to work in the biopharmaceutical industry, and I work with the bags that undergo these cryopreservation temperatures. And so most of the bags that we work with are fluoropolymer bags, and these
Wow.
bags can withstand a wide variety of temperatures because the applications can range from the temperatures could range from like 20 degrees Celsius all the way to minus 196 degrees Celsius. And
Well,
these
she said
bags are able
196,
to,
and we did it on Fahrenheit, and that is negative 321 Fahrenheit. That is freaking
yeah,
cold.
yeah. And even in the application of it, I wish I had some videos to show, but in when I'm using them, I have to wear cryoprotective gloves because within seconds, if it comes into contact with your skin, like it has damaging effects to it because that's how cold it is. And so working with liquid nitrogen is something that I really enjoy. And I really love my job because I like the impact that the products we're working with has on the life of every human being on this earth.
Yeah, and that's a great point too. When it comes to materials, there really is a lot of testing. And what I
Yeah.
like to ask our guests is that, part of the engineering design process is testing and retesting. So,
Hmm.
and I would, I'm answering the question for you, but how often, when you're testing these materials, do you actually get it right the first time? Because it's especially when you have health and safety on the line, or in some cases, a lot of money for a product, it has to be perfect. So, how often
Yeah.
is it ever right the first time?
So I would say no, because most of the time we are developing the test plans as we go. And in my company or in my field at least, we there isn't a test method out there for every test that we want to do. And so we design tests as we go. So most of my job encompasses customers that come in they talk to the sales engineers, they talk to them, tell them these are the issues we're having, or this is the kind of bag we need. And then they come to us, the applications engineers, and we have to, do small scale testing in the lab to be able to create what they want or to be able to troubleshoot what issues they're having with the bags. And so it's a quick example I can give is we have a customer that came in a couple weeks ago, and they're having issues with our bags because the bags are being damaged for a certain application they're using. So what I started off doing was basically doing exactly the exact test that they're doing with the bags that they were using to see if I'm going to have the same issues. And I didn't have those issues until I modified the test that I was doing. So I had to change temperature parameters. I had to change the how I seal the bags. I had to change the type of tubing that the bags were using. So I had to switch over to silicone tubing because the temperatures were really high. And so these are things that it's kind of like trial and error, which is not the best way to do it, but it really is like using the knowledge you have already to build out a test plan and you know, improve upon it as you test the bag. So yeah.
Now, what's some of the technological advances that you've worked with in the last few years?
So most of our bags are stored in freezers, and we have different types of freezers that the bags are stored in. We have plate freezers, which basically compress the bags, and
Wow.
that allows for even cooling for the bags to freeze. And then we have regular blast freezers, which are kind of like the regular freezers you have in your house. You just place it on one of the shelves, and then the air just freezes. It's the outer part of the bag freezes first, as compared to the plate freezing, which has an actual even freeze profile. And so advancements include like trying to monitor the freeze profiles of the bags that we're freezing. They're making more advanced freezers that are able to give us more information about what is going on during the freezing process, which is really good. Another example is when I started at the company, we had to do a drop test because that's a question that a lot of customers come to us with, like, can your bags withstand if they're being moved around in the lab? If it drops, is the product within the bag going to be damaged? Like, is the bag going to be damaged? So we do drop tests beforehand. And so I had to literally build a drop tester. Like, I had to put together pieces of wood and paint it and then design like a pull method. But now we have companies that have actually developed drop testers where you just need to push a button, you need to set the parameters, the height, how fast you want it to drop, and then it does everything for you. So that's how technology is really helping us out in my industry.
Well, I'm pretty sure that could get messy sometimes.
Oh yeah, it does.
So people that like making a mess, that could be something fun for them. Now, before I get
Yeah.
to students' questions, we know, like I said, we talked about, you're such an advocate for getting minority women in STEM fields, and you talk about in one of your videos about the imposter syndrome that you faced first coming to this country and getting into your engineering programs and into your career. And I think, before you came on, we were talking. I said, no matter who you are, you're probably going to face imposter syndrome of some sort in your life, but
Yeah.
especially being a woman in a male dominated field, being one of the few minorities. And then also, even within minority women, you may be viewed differently because you came from a different country. Even though there is not much of a language barrier, there's that stereotype that, look, she came from Africa, their education is not as good as ours.
Yeah.
So all that's going to come into play. And you talk about your struggle with that. And it's like I was telling these kids, look, even if you don't want to be an engineer, even if you don't want to, do anything in STEM, even though I know that's the trend that the world is going, it's something that you are going to face and you're going to have to overcome. So talk a little bit about
Yeah.
your journey in that and some things you've done to overcome it.
Yeah. And I want to start off by saying, yes, women experience imposter syndrome a lot, and it is a topic that we talk about a lot. But I was recently talking with my manager and sharing with him some of the fears I have. So there was a transition in my company where I was being, there was a position that was opened up, and the most obvious candidate was myself. But then the person whose shoes I was filling in was like the A-star student in the company. And I was immediately scared, to put myself there. And he told me, he's like, you are the next person in line for this position, not just because that's where you are, because you have what it takes to be able to succeed in this role. And he told me when he started at the company, he also was scared to put himself out there to be able to um be recognized for certain things. And that really shocked me because I really thought it was just women that really struggled with this. And so imposter syndrome is something that constantly comes up. And like you said, it's not just in STEM, it's not just women. Everyone experiences it. Every stage of your life, the higher you go, the more you experience this. And it changed because of how different it is and because of how different it looks. It's easy for you to think, okay, I've dealt with imposter syndrome when I was in college, so I'm good. But then you walk into a room filled with white men and you begin to feel small, you begin to doubt yourself, you begin to forget all the accolades that you have, you know. And so in those times for me, I always try to make sure that in every meeting that I'm in, I walk away having said something. I always make sure my voice is heard. I'm not going to try to be the loudest person in the room, but I'm going to make sure that they know that Lilian has said something because she has input, she has value to whatever topic we're discussing. And that's something that always helps me out because 9 times out of 10, whatever I say, someone else was thinking it and can back it up, you know. But then the one thing that doesn't really help us is keeping quiet and being afraid to speak. There's nothing that can happen to you if you open your mouth and speak. And so I think one advice, if any, I would say always make sure that you do put yourself out there. You do constantly believe in yourself. And I'm blessed with a community of people who, when I'm having these experiences, I'm able to talk to them and they are able to remind me of what I'm doing, what I've achieved, and who I am. And I think that's something that we have to constantly remind ourselves that you are here for a reason. They didn't just gift you this job because you're the prettiest person. They didn't just gift you this job because whatever reason you can think of. They gave this job to you based on your accomplishments, based on your degree, based on the work experience you have, and based on what they think you can do and what you can bring to the company. And so I would always say that regardless of what is thrown at you, whether it's because of the color of your skin, because of your position, because of your race, whatever it is, I would always advise you to remind yourself of who you are and what you carry.
Yeah, and you said yourself that you were applying for jobs you knew you were underqualified for because you didn't think you would even get the interview for the higher one, and you may not have. But I always tell my students, I don't have a whole lot of regrets in life, but the one regret I do have was not anything I failed at. The biggest regret I have in life was not betting on myself when I could have.
Yeah, yeah, and that's real. And I think it's most of the time for women, there's a statistic out there that says women would only apply for jobs if I think they meet like 80% of the requirements. But I spoke with a coworker of mine and he is like a loud person. Everyone would know he's in the room. So one day I asked him, I was like, are you just always learning? Are you just always reading? Do you just have so much information? He's like, half the time I don't even know what I'm talking about. I'm like, really? You know, and but then he has this confidence that makes you believe he knows what he's talking about. And
Absolutely.
that's the confidence that I think a lot of women lack. And so for me, I'm like, okay, if I can check off 3 items on the list, I'm going to make sure that I apply for the job. When I get the interview, I'm going to make sure that I highlight all those 3 things I have and highlight them to a point where they even forget I don't have the other requirements, you know. And I spoke to recruiters and they always tell me that they're not always looking for someone that has every single item on the list. They do that to weed out people. They do that to reduce the number of applicants, and it's working, you know. So challenge yourself, put yourself out there and be confident.
Yeah, and that's in any field, and that's great advice. But I do have some questions from the students. I'll get to as many of these as I can. This is a
Okay.
good one to start off. This is Justin Clerk. He's a senior, and he asked, what are the biggest uses of plastic that you see are overlooked by people?
The biggest use of plastics that are overlooked, I would say in the medical industry, plastics are essential, especially in the surgical industry or the surgical field. People don't realize the impact that plastics have during that process, and people just focus on plastic bottles that are not being disposed of well. And so I think the medical industry and the aerospace industry as well, those are two industries that highly rely on plastic.
Yeah, it's not just metal. I know
Yeah.
it's a big part of that, but the plastic polymers that have to be able to withstand wind and withstand chemicals is extremely important, and we need
Yeah.
plastic engineers. This is
And
Aaliyah
plastics
Chester.
are very versatile materials, which is why they're able to be used in different industries. So
Absolutely. This is Aaliyah Chester. She's a junior, and she asks, "Has your job commitments ever kept you from your regular life routines?"
no, because I don't let it. That's just the truth. Um, I know people who are struggling to have some kind of life because they work too much. I make it a point to always make sure I have a life outside of work. And even with STEM content that I'm creating on social media, I I carve out time for that as well. And so I know that if my job is not there, I still need to have a life. I don't want to be that person that is trying to figure out, okay, what do I do? I don't work anymore. What happens to my life? So no, I don't allow work to not let me have a life, like daily routine. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's important to always have the work-life balance. This is Katherine Johnson. She's also a junior, and she asked, "When you
Okay.
were going through your imposter syndrome, what was your biggest motivation to keep going?"
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I would say the goals I had. I'm a very ambitious woman, and I have these goals that I want to achieve. Like I have really huge goals, and anytime I'm faced with imposter syndrome, I push through because I know that if I allow the imposter syndrome to overtake me, that stops me from achieving these goals. So that's the one thing that I think always keeps me in check, like my goals.
Yeah, and along those same lines, I just got a couple more from the students, but this is Jacayla Page. She's a sophomore, and she asked, "Who were the main people that inspired you to get through your imposter syndrome?"
Ooh, that's also a good question. I would say I look up to Michelle Obama, and I know that's a very like everyone loves Michelle, but I look up to her because she's very confident. And the day that I read a statistic that women in high positions also struggle with imposter syndrome, and through many of her interviews, I've heard her speak of how she's not perfect and she also struggles, but I see her and she looks like this confident person, and that inspires me a lot. So one thing I do in my spare time is I watch interviews of either celebrities or people that I admire, and she's one of them. So anytime I watch those interviews, it builds confidence within me. So I would say Michelle Obama is someone that definitely inspires me to push through.
Yeah, she's a great speaker. I just got two more from the students. This is Carltavius Ross. He's a senior, and he asked, "What is the most enjoyable part about being an engineer?"
Ooh, the fact that nothing ever works. I know, and that's probably not what you expected to hear, but I love that challenge. I love that everything is not straightforward. You don't go to work and it's you're doing the same thing every single day. I love that it's dynamic. I love that there are days where you try everything, it doesn't work. I leave the office, I'm down, but then it pushes me to be innovative. It pushes me to be creative the next day. And so I love the challenge that it presents. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I just got one more from the students, and this is from Layla Young. She's our Miss Velma Jackson cheerleader going to Spelman College, where your friend Amir
Oh,
Brooks
nice.
also went.
Yeah. Yep.
And she joined us in the fall. But she asked, first of all, I really love your YouTube page, and
Thank
I really
you.
love your accent. Um,
Thank you.
but what is the most important skill for an engineer to have?
Mm. Oh my gosh. I would say the generic answer is problem solving,
Yep.
but I would say creativity. because there's so many times where, yes, you're able to solve a problem in engineering in the field, but then you need to have a creative idea. You need to be able to think in a creative way to be able to implement these solutions. And I can give a quick example. We had a customer that came to us with an issue, and as always, I was repeating exactly what they were doing in their company. And so basically the bags were being placed on a rocker that rocks and thaws the frozen bag. And they were having issues. So I had to repeat that. And I literally just used regular tape to secure the bag so it doesn't like shift. And that worked. So we had a follow-up meeting with them, and I was telling them that, oh yeah, this is what I did. And they were so amazed at the fact that I thought to use tape to secure the bags. And I was like, that was my creative mind working, you know? And so I think a lot of creativity comes to play when you're working. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but sometimes it's just about being more.
No. Yeah.
Now, we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much as always for joining us. But before we go, first of all, we need to know where to find you on social media because you're putting a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, no. So I'm on Instagram at engineer_Lilian, ENGR_Lilian. And I'm on Twitter, I think it's LilyJ27. But on social media, I'm just advocating for more Black women in STEM and just really trying to be creative, finding creative ways to advocate for that representation and also to educate people on what plastics engineering is about. And so feel free to connect with me, send me a message. I always reply. And hopefully you guys were able to learn a thing or two from me.
Yeah, and before we go, you are a Black woman in a field dominated by white men. You are an immigrant to this country that had a whole education in another continent. But yet you have overcome the odds and just doing some amazing things, creating some incredible content, really getting out there. That's the way I was able to find you. So what can these young people do now to, they're going to face the same obstacles and probably not even close to what you face as an immigrant. So why does engineering need them and how can they overcome those same obstacles?
Engineering needs every single student in that class because everyone has a different story and we all bring our struggles, our stories to the table when designing, when creating products, when trying to serve a particular group of people. And so everyone's experience is valuable. Everyone's struggle is valuable. And so I would say, put yourself out there. Yeah. Don't be afraid to, whether it's engineering you're passionate about, whether it's fashion you're passionate about, whether it's beauty, put yourself out there because now technology has made it possible for every single thing you're passionate about to reach the right audience. Yep. Influencing is such a big deal. TikTok is an app that is really pushing the content that people want. And so if there's something you enjoy doing and you think nobody wants to hear this, I promise you there's a huge population of people that want to see what you do in secret, and don't be afraid of it. Put your idea to paper and make sure that by the mid-year mark, you're checking in. Have I done anything to bring me one step closer to achieving this goal? And always challenge yourself, always check in with yourself, and always remember that you have something that the world needs.
Absolutely, man. Great stuff. Lilian Judy, all the way from Lowell, Massachusetts. Check her out on YouTube. Check her out on Instagram. Great Instagram follow, and one of the most talented up-and-coming plastic engineers here in the country. So thank you so much again for taking some time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And always good luck to all of you.
It's always a pleasure. Talk to you soon, my friend.
Okay, bye.
Yeah.